Hi, folks. I decided that I would do a video talking about a very small part of my life. I've had quite an interesting life so far. I'm 47 now. And this concerns when I was working in the city in London. I came to London after I finished my first degree, and I'd taken some qualifications in secretarial stuff. So at that time, I was working as a PA, personal assistant, and I decided that I would do a master's degree in computing because I was very good at using the computers and whatnot, doing the word processing. I seem to have a bit of a knack for it, so that's what I decided I would do, because every time I rang any colleges about doing courses, they said, oh, you're too well qualified, you've already got a degree and a good degree at that, so why don't you look to do something at university? So I did. While I was doing my master's, which I did part-time and I paid for it all myself out of my wages, I got a job working at a solicitor's called Rowan Moore, and they were somewhere around Blackfriars. I have the feeling that it was Carter Lane, and I've looked on Google Maps at the area, but the trouble is with London that it changes so fast. I have a feeling they were Carter Lane, like I say, but big solicitors companies in London tend to get bought and sold, and they're amalgamated into different solicitors now. The company of Rowan Moore still exists, but it's conglomerated, so it's Rowe Moore Brown and something or other now, and it doesn't look like they're at the same offices anymore. Anyhow, back in the day, I worked for the help desk, and one of the interesting things that happened was that I ran into Gary McKinnon. Now, it's a bit disappointing in retrospect. I've tried to get in touch with Gary McKinnon a few times to say, hey, do you remember me? But I don't think he really wants to remember me, because in some ways it's not really very convenient given the nature of the things that he was talking about to me. Because at that time I was working on the help desk, so I was helping secretaries and solicitors with their various IT problems. This was so long ago, people. I've worked out it must be a sort of 1998 to 2000. I wasn't at Rowan Moore for very long, because I then went on to work for a company that made legal software, bespoke legal software, for a bit. And I didn't really like that job either. It was one of those times where it was just job after job of like shitty things that I didn't really enjoy in particular. This help desk, there were usually 4 people on duty at any one time, and it was staffed from 6 in the morning to about 12 at night. So it was shift work, and sometimes you'd even get called out. So you had a pager that you took home. And if one of the solicitors was working late at night and they got a paper jam in the printer, then, I was the one that had to go out and sort it for them, which was kind of okay because it was all very glitzy in a way. The company would pay for a black cab for you from your home. I was living in Lewisham at the time, into Blackfriars and then back again. The couple of times I got called, I went in once, but the other time I didn't hear the pager and I got told off for it. So I wasn't all that great at this job. And I didn't really like the people either, if I'm being completely honest, because it was a city job, and you can imagine what that was like. Little hippie me didn't really, it didn't suit me in many ways. I was much better later on. I became a university lecturer, and that, as far as jobs go, it really suited me. I love being a lecturer. I used to work for this guy. I found his LinkedIn profile. He was the manager of the IT department. His name was Courtney Park. And I remember him. He was kind of a big, blustering man. He was a little bit red faced, looked like he had a bit of a high blood pressure problem, maybe, and he smoked like an absolute chimney, like everybody in the IT department did. And back in those days, Rowan Moore's a smoking office. I hadn't, even before then, worked in a smoking office. Everyone went outside for a cigarette. It was just amazed me, right? It was just the IT department was just, the walls were yellow. It was absolutely disgusting. But Courtney was an okay bloke, actually. He was quite garrulous and outgoing and okay. There were some other people there that I could totally, I didn't really get on with them, but I would still go out for a drink with them now and again. So sometimes we went to this pub called the Blackfriars. This is one of the ones that was quite near to the office. And this is where I spent some time with Gary. What was happening at the time that I met Gary is he didn't work for Rowan Moore, so far as I remember. He worked for a temp agency that provided him and a few other IT lackeys. And basically, what they were doing was rolling out Windows 95 onto the computers, because back in the day we still had Windows 3.1. If you can imagine that, it's like so so long ago. Windows 3.1. Oh my god, floppy disks, man. So yeah, and his job was to do what's called copying images onto the computers. So they had this one kind of image, which was a setup of Windows on a computer, and they got it all configured for the network and things like that. And then they copied it onto all the other computers. So taking computers away from staff and providing them with the computer back when all the software on it had been upgraded. Now, one of the things that Gary did when he was hacking, and actually, before I get on to how he was doing his hacking, I'll tell you that I've drunk with Gary in the Blackfriars. And also, because I did night shifts and stuff, I also had conversations in the office with Gary. And he did tell me at the time that he was hacking into NASA computers and stuff. And he told me all this stuff that he was interested in about UFOs and whatnot. And I think he thought that I'd be interested because I was doing a master's degree, and he regarded me as somebody who was a bit fairly clever and out of the ordinary, perhaps. But I have to say, at the time, I mean, this was, it was back in the day. I must have been somewhere between 25 and 30, and it was interesting, but I wasn't really all that interested in things like UFOs or the Illuminati or free energy and stuff like that. I did have some knowledge of it because I had a very serious boyfriend when I was about 18 who was into all that stuff. And we had many a conversation where I just said, well, all right, these people may exist, but I don't know how you'd ever defeat them. So it's kind of pointless to even be interested. So, it wasn't, by the time I met Gary McKinnon, it wasn't something I'd thought about for a very long time. I hadn't ever had any experiences where I'd seen anything. And I suppose in some ways, the moment I met Gary McKinnon was when my life changed. And I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea. When Gary was telling me he was hacking into NASA and stuff, I wasn't even sure if I believed him or if it was some sort of chat up thing over the beers that he was saying to impress me. I do remember him talking about it because when we were rolling out Windows 95, the help desk job changed a little bit, because under Windows 3.1, if somebody had a problem and they couldn't fix it, when we were explaining to them over the phone what to do, we had to get off our bums and go to where they were in the office. It was a bloody absolute rabbit warren of an office. It was massive. So you had to run all the way up to these offices and hope you could find whoever it was, because it was an absolute warren, like I just said. But when when we got Windows 95, we suddenly had this technology. I think it was called RAS, remote access. So you could remotely connect to the person's desktop, but only on the Windows 95 computers, not on the old Windows 3.1 ones. So you could take over their mouse pointer and you could use their programs like Word or whatever, but they had to have the client for the remote access installed on the computer. And it's exactly this remote access software that Gary was installing on the computers at NASA and was it the Pentagon that he hacked into as well? I know that he was doing all these various different, very dodgy places that he was hacking into. This literally was stories that he was telling me in the pub, and I was like, yeah, or nerdy hacking stories, yawn. I can't believe that I'm saying that. But yeah, that is the software that we were rolling out and beginning to use, was this remote access software that Gary used. And I have to tell you that rather disappointingly, Gary's IT skills in that respect are not some sort of super hacker skills. They really had to have been slack with their security for Gary to have been able to get into their systems and install this remote access client and to be able to use it. I mean, that was they must have been just so slack. And he really was made an example of. I'm sure many hundreds of thousands of nerdy, spotty kids were hacking into NASA for kicks. I'm absolutely sure that he probably didn't get the idea himself, that he probably found it on some bulletin board or early internet forums back in the day. He must have, because I don't know, the other aspect of it is because it's the software that we were installing at the time, then, obviously he knew about it that way. I have listened to him talking about stuff. He was talking about writing a Perl script to check which of the computers didn't have a password set, or if the password was set to the word password. So Perl scripts are quite, respect Gary, obviously. You know your coding there. Perl's not the easiest language to code in. It's a bit sort of clunky and crappy. And it is old times computing skills, really, Perl. So respect there. So anyway, there's the situation. We were in the Blackfriars drinking, I can't remember if he drank something like cider actually, but it was always pints. I was the sort of studenty type girl who would be drinking a pint of something. So yeah, and this is the sort of thing that he would talk about if I got stuck with him in a corner. And he'd chew my ear off about this stuff that he was doing. And I don't think I ever really believed him, but I do remember him. And I'll tell you why I remember him. It's because of his face. You don't forget somebody when they have that kind of face. He's got a very distinct bone structure, his cheekbones, and a kind of almost foxy kind of look to his face. So it does sadden me a bit that we've never been able to get together and have a chat. I expect he feels a bit threatened in a way by what I know about him, and perhaps he feels that with what I know about what he was doing in the company and the fact that we used that remote access software in that company at that time, I don't know if he was paid to do overtime and he was in those offices quite late, like I was sometimes, that maybe he was using the computers at Rowan Moore. I don't know. I wouldn't like to accuse him of that. Maybe it's just something that he did in his spare time. But I have to tell you, kiddos, copying images onto machines is pretty boring. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it was something he was doing to keep himself occupied. The saddest thing of all about this, with Gary not talking to me, is that he's now interested in free energy. And I've tried to get him to go and look at my website, which is about megalithic sites, so Stonehenge and all the different dolmens and so on. This is one of my favourite. We went to visit this site on Anglesey, which is called Ligwy. It's near to Moylvray, which is a little coastal town. Very quaint. Yeah, this was such a lovely day. I took my little girl up there with me, and she went chasing the sheep, and I was investigating the dolmen and what it does. I've discovered it wasn't my idea, okay? I can't claim any sort of genius in this. It was completely Christopher Dunn's book on the pyramids of Giza that sparked my interest in seeing whether you really can generate electricity from standing stones. And to my utter amazement, it worked. Although people, they just laugh at me and say that, it can't possibly be done. It's against the laws of physics and all that stuff. But voltmeters don't lie, basically. And there's nothing in it for me. I suppose I really got interested in this, David Icke truth kind of stuff around 2008, 2009, not long after I had my first child, which was awfully inconvenient because motherhood and waking up didn't really seem to go together very well. And it gave people an excuse to really rip into me and make my life a living hell. So it's a real shame that somebody like Gary, who's interested in free energy, can't see his way to helping me with my project. Although on the whole, I can't really get anybody interested, because even though that I've proved that it works, nobody, I guess, is interested in getting knee deep into these structures. When you're in a field somewhere with maybe the odd hiker walking by and you're playing didgeridoo sounds to a stone monument, yeah, I guess that looks a bit crazy. Other people haven't got the guts to do it. Personally, I don't give a shit. The reason I've stopped doing it, well, there's two reasons actually, and one of the ones I would tell you is that apart from the fact that it costs a lot of money to get to these places and bed and board, and I'm increasingly ill with my various health problems that I have. I really need to calculate alignments with suns. When I'm talking about suns, not our sun, because our sun, we know, aligns with these monuments at equinoxes and solstice days. But suns in other galaxies, as we call them stars, also align with these monuments, and it's working out those alignments. I'm no astronomer, basically. I need to work with somebody who can calculate these things for me. I know there's software that can do it. There are other reasons that make it not particularly something I'm rushing to doing at the moment. Maybe I'll just let my kids get to the age of 16 each, and then, I'll go off and do my bonkers things on my own, because that was a bone of contention for some people. Anyway, so I thought I'd tell you my interesting tale, a bit of background about me, my life, meeting and working with Gary McKinnon, and drinking in the Blackfriars. There's another pub round there called Old King Lud, I think it was called. I never used to drink in there, but this Blackfriars one, I pop in there after work. Anyway, kids, that's where I'll leave this particular rambling story. I thought if Alan Watt can just bloody ramble on for 4 hours and people listen to it, then I can talk about what I like. Tatty bye.